So I'm a New Yorker. I know New York very well. And New York is a town that has an enormous pride in itself as the best city in the world, the greatest city in the world. And there's a lot of money in New York. There's a lot of billionaires in New York. The media of the world is focused in New York. 9/11 had a profoundly negative impact on the United States in that you saw in the media capital of the world a staged terrorist attack where not only one building was taken down, but then when all the media was focused on that one building going down, the second building went down. I think at that moment, the people in New York who are uber wealthy and around the world as well took that as an indication that, you know what, we need to start pulling our cash out of the system completely. No more philanthropy projects, no more good guy, no more Mr. Nice Guy. We need to start pulling our money out. And we saw liquidity dry up. And we saw the response from the Federal Reserve Bank was to lower rates and inject lots of cash. And a lot of that had to do with those with a lot of resources were pulling it out and putting in that offshore kind of black pool of capital. And I think we're still kind of in that period where the people who have, you know, the oligarchs and the robber barons from the 1920s, you know, a lot of them went on to build libraries or they built social programs. You know, they felt an obligation to give back in a huge institutional way, build universities, build schools. We don't really see that anymore. You know, I'm open to be debated on this point because I think that those with those resources are really just hightailing it out of town. They're like, we want to get out of here. That political dynamic in the country where you had the heartland was kind of portrayed as not understanding how important it was for the U.S. to participate globally in this way and was associated more with, let's say, right-wing politics. And you saw that completely flip. And this is the period we're living in now. It flipped totally in 2016 when Trump became president. And then what's been shocking is the reveal that the left is actually the most out of control of any of them. So during that period where they exported all the jobs to China, you had politicians who were more on the conservative side, like a Ross Perot, was very vocal in saying, you know, don't ship all your jobs. You know, if you ship your manufacturing, giant sucking sound, right? And so, but the left and the liberals who control Hollywood and the media would belittle him and make him look foolish, and they attacked him and he pulled out of his race for president. But they had a great hand in controlling the culture in a lot of ways because the coolest people, the movie stars, were associated with, you know, the Democrats. And but in 2016, the tables were flipped. Trump really took the media and grabbed it by the, you know, I'm not going to fill in the beep. And so then we saw in the left when the veneer falls down and they're not really the lovey-dovey, soft, fuzzy, you know, culturally minded New Yorker magazine reading, you know, since that they portray themselves to be. They're really vicious, authoritarian. So authoritarianism lives with the Democrats. That's where it lives and breathes. And now that's been exposed. And that's what I think the biggest reveal of the past few years, a flavor of totalitarianism, which we haven't yet seen, but we have a kind of an indication. So the reveals of the Twitter files certainly give us an insight into what these folks are thinking about, that absolute 360-degree control over every piece of material that enters the public domain is reviewed, censored, edited, transformed, and that is beyond just censorship. It is dystopian. They've created a dystopian environment where the words coming out of your mouth are morphed in mid-sentence into different words. And then you're portrayed as having said that, and then somebody else who reacts to it is actually a robot who's talking to another bot who's writing a story about you and why you said that in real time against you. And now they're mobs after you for something that was transformed in mid-sentence that you never said. This type of really control of technology in the media that we're seeing unfold now in deep fakes and things like this are where, you know, it's hard to imagine exactly where it's going, but they see it taking shape. This word of plundering, you know, is you see it throughout society. So you see people going into convenience stores and walking out with hundreds of dollars worth of stuff, and they don't pay for it, and nobody's chasing them. They're plundering. Then you see the political classes plundering. And it gets back to that 9/11 reference, which is like the beginning of a plundering era, where the people said, you know what, I'm not even going to hide the fact that I'm really moving stuff around and I'm not paying taxes, but I've sponsored the kids a camp for blind children, and I'm a good person. They're just saying, you know what, I'm just going to plunder. And that is just permeated throughout every strata, right? From the bottom, from the person who's, going into CVS drugstore and ripping off a bottle of aspirin, to, a political operative in Washington, D.C., who might be a senator who's trading on inside information.
So they're projecting onto those people, like, sure, we'll let them steal $100 because 100 times 1.7 million, I just made 17 million.
Right. If they steal $100 and they may got to print another 100, which means somebody gets one and they get 1.7 million.
Yeah.
Right. So it's in their best interest. That's why they never prosecute the plunderers, because they get to print more money, in which they get a disproportionate amount of thereof. Building was like off grid, and they got exposed.
Yeah.
And he burnt it down. Now there was a remake of the film relatively recently with Will Smith.
Yeah.
It's called Enemy of the State.
Yeah.
And it's an excellent remake. Usually a lot of times remakes suck. But in this case, it was and Will Smith is great in it. And I think Gene Hackman plays a small cameo in the film. But it's also, you see he's in Washington, maybe a lawyer, and suddenly he finds out his clothes. And they show him getting bugged. Like, all these bugs are being inserted, boom, 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 boom. And he meets a guy like a Gene Hackman and has to get debugged. And but then we're way beyond that. I mean, that's already 20 years ago. And the sophistication and the ability to survey and all the transactions have now reached new levels. You, with Bastiat, as you quote often about making plunder a way of life, and it becomes permeates every institution in society. Here, it's almost the absolute opposite, where the goal is the reverse of plunder. They are coming out of the plunder. It's like seeing a film where instead of a compressed, sped up version of something collapsing, it's a reverse. You're seeing something that has collapsed.
Yeah.
Spontaneously, it's in reverse. You're seeing it all come together in reverse. It's all being built up in reverse. So you're going from everywhere else in the world seems to be experiencing entropy, just dissolving and uncontrollably being fragmentized and atomatized and sliced and diced and thrown to the wind. Here it's like spontaneous order, spontaneous combustion, it's all coming together spontaneously. And so it's getting to be more of a dramatic contrast, I would say. This Cube announcement that the President Bukele made this past week, he's out there, and just like you're watching this thing, two things happened. First of all, he announced Miss Universe contest is coming to El Salvador next year. It was a drop during the actual Miss Universe pageant.
Yeah.
And, people are like, oh, wow, fantastic. That's going to be a huge winner. It's a big tourist boom. It shows that this place is open for business.
Yeah.
2 days later, they drop this, like, here I am. I'm in 6 different cities. I'm putting up these cubes, as they're called, which is an acronym for something. And they're local centers for all kinds of access to technology and learning centers and job centers, right? So it's a real community access point for people who want to learn and grow and do stuff like that. So that's all that happened within 2 or 3 days. I mean, just boom, boom, boom. And that's just spontaneously all coming together.